Hello, everybody, and welcome into the latest episode of CMS Connected. This is the web content management industry's only news commentary show. I'm your host, Butch Stearns, and once again, welcome into this edition of CMS Connected. The topic, the theme of today's show, if you will, a creative look into the importance of good web design and site architecture and the role that CMS platforms play in achieving an eye-catching website. I always like to repeat the topic. For me, I don't know about you, but I needed to hammer it over my head. So let me do that again. A creative look into the importance of good web design and site architecture and the role that CMS platforms play in achieving an eye-catching website. Again, my name is Butch Stearns. I am the co-host here on CMS Connected, and I'm joined by my esteemed co-host, as always, Scott Liewehr from Digital Clarity Group, President, Principal Analyst. Have you had any other titles since our last episode?
I haven't, but I'm happy that
about?
You got my last name right.
I know.
That's great.
Well,
I'm trying to call you Bruce today.
That envelope with the money in it actually worked really
It does
well.
work, huh?
What's going on? What about this topic today, Scott?
Yeah, this topic is a great one. I mean, really, because this is where it all comes together. I mean, this is where, when we talk about the information design and creative design that goes into it, that's what people think of first when they go to a website. That's what's going to be engaging or not. We can talk about content all we want to, but if you come to a site that is horribly organized or is not creatively effective, then you're not going to stay for a while. So this is really important.
All right, so let's talk about what we have coming up in this show, in these segments. If you're familiar with the show, you know we keep it moving. We give you a lot of variety and different things that we do. If you're new to this show, let me tell you what we got coming up in this show. We're going to be joined by Steve Mammone from a company here in Boston called Get Fused. They are a web design and development company making a lot of noise around here, helping brands reach audiences in the digital space. Steve's going to come in here and talk passionately about something that he's been involved with for a long, long time, and that's the subject of today's show. In our Vendor Spotlight segment, we'll be joined, as always, by Seth Gottlieb, CMT from Linebridge Group. Seth will talk passionately about Crafter software in our Vendor Spotlight. And of course, it's another edition of Rapid Fire where we put Scott on the clock. You ready?
I'm ready.
You're not ready, but that's okay.
I'll be ready
You'll be ready.
45
You'll be ready when it's time for Rapid Fire. But before we begin, as always, we would like to acknowledge our lead sponsors here on CMS Connected who make this show possible. The first one is Falcon Software. Falcon provides creative design, e-commerce, web content management, social and mobile solutions for organizations across the globe. That is Falcon Software. They are one of our lead sponsors here on CMS Connected. And Digital Clarity Group. DCG is a research and advisory firm focused on navigating organizations through the digital transformation process. And those of you out there going through the digital transformation process, you know that oftentimes it can be painful. Scott tries to make it pain-free and his good folks at Digital Clarity Group. But I also like to recommend that, say it, Butch, download the white paper right down below you where you're watching this program on Web CMS and the creative design of your website located. It's right at the bottom of your screen there. Don't forget to download that. So let's dive right into this. That is our show. That's what we got going on. So Scott, let's get right into the top news stories and events around the CMS industry. We're going to hit three main topics today. We'll spend our most time on the first one. And the first one is Gartner's 2013 Magic Quadrant for Web CMS leaders and challengers. What do we need to know about the Magic Quadrant right now?
Sure. So this is essentially the be-all, end-all. This is where a lot of CIOs, a lot of companies look to Gartner's Magic Quadrants. They have probably over 100 of them in various spaces, various horizontals, where the web content management one, it's an annual report that's created by the folk Mick McComsey and a number of others on his team there over at Gartner who put this together on an annual basis to essentially compare and rate the products that are on the market today based on the needs of their audience. And so the Magic Quadrant is a way that kind of looks at two axes of information. On the vertical axis is their ability to execute. It includes things like it includes basically the number of inquiries that they've had about that the Gartner analyst has had from CIOs about that company, their marketing execution, a number of other factors, sales, things like that. It's basically it's a look at each company about how they've done thus far in the past year.
So again, as an overview of it, this one is focused on WCM, right?
Correct. Absolutely.
So let's go a little bit deeper on that.
Sure.
Talk about the focus on WCM. What are some of the pros and cons? What do you like about the Magic
Sure.
Quadrant. What don't you like?
Yeah,
about it?
let me finish really quickly. I jumped the gun on you there. So its ability to execute is the vertical axis. The horizontal axis is essentially their strategy, what they call completeness of vision. So the vertical axis is rating how they've done in the past year, their market presence, their marketing execution, the product itself, that sort of thing. On the horizontal axis, they're being rated, essentially on things like basically forward-looking. So how the analyst thinks about their marketing vision for the future, the product vision for the future, those sorts of things. So one is kind of how are they looking in terms of their innovation, and vertically it's how they've executed thus far.
Okay, so let me ask the question again now. What do you like
sure.
about the Magic Quadrant? What are the pros and cons of this?
I've been kind of critical about it, right, for a couple of reasons.
It's not like you.
No, me. So what I like about it is I think it's really nice to be able to come to a single report, be able to get a nice overview of a number of companies, see kind of essentially who are the most quote unquote relevant companies. I'll come back to that in a second, but who are the most relevant vendors in the space, and kind of see how they compare to each other. The challenge, and it's nice to see, there are some pros and cons listed for each one of them. I think 3 pros and 3 cons, or 3 cautions and 3 whatever they call them, about each of those vendors. And I think the analysts do a decent job about sharing some criticisms and some backpatting about each. I think the challenge with it is that the vast majority of the folks who look at this Magic Quadrant are actually not Gartner subscribers, and so they are, and it is intended for an audience of Fortune 1000 sorts of CIOs, but it's looked at and looked to by all the mid-market companies, many other folks who don't necessarily have the same kind of criteria and challenges that those in the larger enterprise do, that these kind of Fortune 1000s have. And so it's created within a context that more than half, I'd say, of its audience does not really have in mind. And so therefore, folks are apt to make kind of poor decisions. They're looking through a lens which is not really theirs to look through. It's not really addressing their issues, I don't think.
So let's go a little deeper and talk about some of the vendors by vendor by vendor here, and look at what the Magic Quadrant says about them.
Sure, let's do that. So on the winner, and I don't know if we have a snapshot of it or not to show, but basically the leader in the quadrant, the one that was kind of, it's obviously best to be furthest north and east, right? So up and to the right is what they call it.
Us that grew up in the Northeast love to say that.
There you go.
We're better than everybody else because we tell people we are.
Is that why you're going to Maine next week?
That's exactly.
That's right. Get as far up there as you possibly
That's
can, right?
There
Give you all the help you can
Reinforce that thought leadership in the space, whatever
Exactly.
space we're talking about.
So you want to generally be up and to the right is better. And I think here, Butch, the winner, quote unquote, of this year was Adobe. And I think that's not really a surprise to anyone. Forrester has their version of the MQ, which is what they call the Forrester Wave, and they essentially rated them furthest out as well as a winner. I think the challenges that I have with this are, I actually think that Adobe is fantastic in what they do. They have a great product. They bought Days web content management product. They've got 6 portions of their strategy, WCM essentially being one of them. They've made some great acquisitions. They've got a nice vision for how content should all work together, and really how to enable the marketer to be able to get their message out to the audience in the most innovative way. They have a really nice way of making it available on mobile, so folks can manage that content on their mobile devices. They've got probably, if not the best, certainly one of the top 3 most user-friendly experiences. It's a really nice, slick product to use. So certainly it deserves many of the accolades that it gets. I think the challenge for me is that it's really focused on the marketer and serving the marketer, and specifically the marketer in B2C. But there's an awful lot of businesses out there that are B2B, that web content management also plays and is relevant in the within the employer, so what we call the B2E, the business to employee, so managing portals and intranets and that sort of stuff. It doesn't really touch on any of that. It doesn't really address any of those needs so well, or rather, it can be used for that. But it's the capabilities and the things that they're putting out in each of the new releases are really targeted towards making the marketer's role easier, and that's really valid as we're thinking about the creation of content. They're making that process from the time that it's designed in Photoshop or in InDesign all the way through it's making it on the web. That's certainly one one path of content to get to the web. But there's tons of other content sitting in repositories inside your organization that I feel like Adobe doesn't do a great job addressing how are you going to pull that up, or they don't necessarily have a big leg up over others in terms of that.
You are watching CMS Connected. My name is Butch Stearns, Scott Liewehr alongside. We are talking today about a creative look into the importance of good web design and site architecture and the role that CMS platforms play in achieving an eye-catching website. Again, this is the content management industry's only news commentary show. In our headlines that we're talking about right now, we are talking about Gartner's Magic Quadrant. Scott, another question I have about this before we go on to our two other headlines is who reads Gartner's Magic Quadrant? Who finds it valuable?
Yeah, sure. So like I say, its intended audience is its basis of subscribers, which tend to be Fortune 1000 CIOs, right, are the ones who are looking to the Magic Quadrant the most. I think, though, that probably everyone who's in a decision-making capacity, whether they are on the business side, whether they are the CIO, they're a direct report to, whatever, and across, again, not just necessarily your large enterprises in the Fortune 1000, but your small businesses, medium-sized businesses, they're all looking at the quadrant, I think, generally. As non-subscribers, it's available, it's pretty available by, you can download it by a number of the vendors that are in it will buy reprint rights and make it available out on the web for just your email address and some information about yourself. So it's fairly readily available that people can get their hands on it, but it's not written for them. And so things about like how it handles significantly, how some of the products handle very complex situations, whether that be multilingual, the multi-site management, those sorts of things are how they're rating these guys in terms of their product capabilities. Those might not be relevant challenges for mid-market companies or even smaller market companies.
All right, the headline for our second news item as we move on here on CMS Connected is why small data is the next big thing for marketers. And for that, on Thursday, August 22nd, Alan Bondi, partner and principal analyst at Digital Clarity Group, wrote a feature article for Direct Marketing News called Why Small Data is the Next Big Thing for Marketers. As an expert in small data and data-driven marketing, Alan Bondi has great insights on how marketing teams can leverage the concept for practical results. We'll get deeper into this. Scott, let me start with the bigger question. What is small data?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good question. So small data is essentially the idea that Alan has in writing this piece is that it's about the last mile of big data. So big data is supposed to be, basically it's data and analytics and information, and what defines big data from regular data is supposed to be that it's this really large repositories of information, really large sample sizes. So it's when we're talking about exabytes and multiple terabytes of data, right? And so, to be honest, big data is not necessarily a relevant issue for many mid-market companies, again, who don't have that size of data. Where it becomes relevant, though, if you're talking about social graphs, and you're talking about making informative information about things that are public information. So I think, though, that small data, the idea of small data is there's lots of challenges of big data. Number one, it's huge. You've got to have lots of infrastructure to be able to manage that. You've got to be a business that has the ability, wherewithal, analysts to be able to sift through all that data and make meaning from it. Small data is about how do you take the value of all that data that's out there and basically make it actionable and meaningful and usable by someone who's in the line of business who's not an analyst, who can put that information to use and make something user-friendly out of it, make an insight.
So again, this is an article in Direct Marketing News, Alan Bondi writing it, and there's a quote Alan has in this article I'd like to read to you, and the quote is from Alan: "We need to re-envision the last mile, as Scott just alluded to, of big data via consumer style, more responsive, more social apps that help us turn insight into action. The last mile of big data is really where the value is created." How? Why, Scott?
Yeah, sure. So I think 3 points need to be made here. Number one is that big data is really difficult, right? It's hard. Again, it requires analysts, it requires lots of systems, and so the challenge about that is being able to make that actionable and valuable. When we talk about big data, we talk about 4 V's essentially. Sorry, we talk about 3 V's, and those are the volume, velocity, and what's the other one? Variety, right? That's what defines big data usually. And what we're basically saying here is that the fourth V needs to be value. That what business value is it bringing? So let's think about an example of kind of where small data comes into play. A good example for this is take the Nike Fuel Band, right? For example, tons and tons of athletes that are out there are using information. They're doing calorie counting. They're making behavioral changes. They're using energy in certain ways. They're using calories in certain ways. They're taking on various activities. There's lots and lots of data being collected all over. They're bringing though back to you that value is how can you get insight from that? How should you be eating? Should you add more calories to your diet or lose it? What else should you continue to be able to do based on basically what thousands and thousands and thousands of people have done? They get insight from that, and it gives you real-time information in context to where you are and what you're doing right now, like literally over a band or over the web. That's the idea of small data. Taking lots of that information that's out there, culling it down, make it valuable so that you can actually put it into use right now.
So when we're talking about the last mile, again, let's before we move on from the Scott, hit that point one more time. Give me another answer to the last mile that really creates value of it. To me, it's in a general sense, it's sort of that same thing we all say in all of our organization is you got to go that last 10%.
Sure.
You got to really find out what it is. And when it comes to big data, there's so much of it. And again, it can be driven by industry, whether you're in a compliant industry or whatever. But when it comes to the last mile, help me understand that a little better.
Sure. So it really is, what it comes down to is think about being able to share information. So maybe I get some access to information. Maybe it's about, I don't know what it would be, but some data that I'm a person in the company. I'm working for a large company. I'm working for Coca-Cola, and there's lots and lots of information there that tells me what people prefer in Coca-Cola over Pepsi, and I've got some access to some data. I want to be able to make that information shareable. Can I get that out for other people to be able to see, to be able to take action on? Can I make sure that the marketers see that so they can go put out some new and show the new study and piece of information? Can I put it out available for the people, anybody who comes to our website, they can see, access that information? Can I use that to talk to folks who might be coming to our site to get information about Coca-Cola, and I can get where they are. I can help to make the context of their decision easier for them. Coke is a bad example. Nobody goes to the website to figure out if they should drink Coke or not. But take another product.
But that's the type of data that would be gathered.
But that's the type of data would be there. So it's to be able to make it in real time. You know who your audience is. You know what information they're looking for, what insights they're looking for, what insights, or rather what challenges that you might be able to perceive they have based on the type of member of the audience they are. You can give tidbits of data that are going to speak to that particular person, depending on why they're there. You asked who is the audience of the Gartner Magic Quadrant. I said it's a CIO. It's not necessarily the marketer or other folks, but I can give to that marketer that comes. I can give some information that are tidbits of data to a marketer that's going to be more relevant to them. What are the points that are going to be more relevant for them versus the points that are going to be more relevant for a CIO? So it's about putting it in context. It's about making it shareable. And it's about basically making it actionable. That's the small data.
All right, let's move on to our third news item and our third headline. Open source, time for a new battle cry. Several weeks back, Joomla made an announcement that Matt Mullenweg, the founder of WordPress, was going to keynote their user conference. Well, apparently you don't want to get in a Twitter battle with you, my friend, Scott Liewehr. So let's go to Twitter and see the conversation between Scott and Steve Berg, or is it Berg?
I think it's Berg, but I really don't know.
Oh, look at that. There's the latest blow. It's insignificant, the pronunciation of his last name. Well, you and Steve from Open Source Training got into a little bit of a, what do we call this? It's not a tweet up.
I don't know.
Tweet battle?
A twaddle?
A twaddle.
I have no idea.
I like it. A twaddle. That's a new term. I like that. Here we go. Is a tweet from you. Joomla, is there someone there who can help me understand this Matt Mullenweg keynote? DM me, please. You just threw the first punch right there.
Yeah, no, I think, my point was, first of all, Joomla is, let's just talk about who Joomla is. Joomla is an open source platform. It is the second most popular, second to WordPress, by the way, most popular platform on the web content management platform on the web. Something like 1.8 million sites are using it or something. WordPress is the most popular. They have an upcoming, what they call their Joomla World Conference, I think is the name of it. And the attendees are folks who are actually developers and folks who have businesses built on Joomla, essentially. So it's users and developers of Joomla who are coming to this conference. And so at this conference, they've decided to hire Matt Mullenweg, who is the founder of WordPress, their biggest kind of the biggest web content management company. They hired him to come in and do the keynote to their audience. And I just thought that just blew my mind. I just didn't get that. And I thought really it was a typo. I thought it was The Onion might have written that headline or something. It's just kind of like, it's like Apple's, what is it, they call it WWDC, their World Conference or whatever for Apple, having Bill Gates come and do the keynote. I mean, it's unheard of in my mind.
If it looks like a rat, if it smells like a rat, it might be a rat.
I just don't.
You called him out.
I called him out, but here's the answer back was, and this is the worst part, and this is where the topic is relevant. The answer back was, well, he's a big innovator in the open source world, and so we need to basically be evangelizing open source. And my thought back is, I just think it's so far time that these open source companies, there's no question that you have to carry the flag of open source. There's no question that you have to, for a non-user, you've got to be able to evangelize to them about why open source might have some advantages. But to an audience of people who have already been evangelized, who are already Joomla people, I just think it's going to fall on deaf ears. And you are telling them, oh, by the way, Joomla hasn't been the best in terms of their communications. I don't think that they are the most innovative platform out there. WordPress and Drupal and others are really starting to do some amazing things to compete with them and frankly take over. And so to go and have Matt Mullenweg have an hour or so of time with your audience to get people to essentially follow him and his ideals, I think all you're going to do is he's got this thing circled on his calendar that he's going to come and he's going to go get some more followers. And as a matter of fact, those were the follow-on tweets about that, where the WordPress was going, good, convert them all.
That was going to be my follow-up question. I can tell you from growing up in mainstream media that when I was a kid and I wanted to get into it, I wanted to have a voice. But as we all know with social media now, with that voice comes responsibility. So you decided to go this route. You called him out. There was a conversation. What was the reaction to it all? Is this something that's ongoing now? Is this something that's going to have some legs?
No, it's not about that. It's just, for me, I've always kind of had this higher calling to open source, just saying like, stop wearing that like a badge, and instead start to talk about what you're doing in terms of innovating and how are you going to help the customer, and starting to think about, you want to move into the enterprise, and help me understand how you understand the challenges of the enterprise, and stop just saying open source for the sake of open source, right? So many have started to do that, and it's been lowered in their messaging on the messaging priority. I think though, so this is going to continue with Joomla. I just think they don't really get it. I think they don't have that much innovative to talk about. Maybe I don't really know. Their platform is struggling in terms of they're not gaining users and developers at the same pace that the other ones are. And I think all you're going to go possibly do is turn a whole bunch of developers. They just don't see this as being competitive. I think it's a very kumbaya sort of community. And essentially the leadership at the top just shows that they don't have, in my opinion, a whole lot of direction. And I think the message is going to be misheard and misunderstood by many.
Again, he is Scott Liewehr. I'm Butch Stearns. You are watching CMS Connected. We give you the headlines, which we just did later in the show. We'll go to Rapid Fire, where we put Scott on the clock, and he gives us his perspective on some of the other topical things in the CMS space. Again, this show, we strive to give you the news commentary around the CMS space, because there is no show like this. Today's topic that we're going on, it's time for our guest segment now, and we're going to take a creative look into the importance of a good web design and site architecture and the role CMS platforms play in helping us create eye-catching websites. And to do that, we're going to go to a guy right in our backyard. We're doing the show live here, or if you're watching it on demand, in New England. And there's a company here in New England called Get Fused, and their president is named Steve Mammone. Get Fused is a web design and development company here in Boston. They have been helping brands reach audiences in the digital space since the mid-90s. Steve is passionate about this. He's a company that's skyrocketing and growing his client list, and he joins us in studio now on CMS Connected. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Butch. Welcome.
Yeah, good to have you here. So tell us a little bit more about Get Fused and about, honestly, why you're passionate about this subject that we're talking about on today's show.
Well, I'm a digital marketing agency, Get Fused, and I primarily am an information architect. So in a content management system, there's a lot of strategy that goes into laying out content, and it all has to work with the end result, which is that visual design. So visual design happens to be probably the first thing everyone noticed but it's the last thing that we address in a user-centered design process.
So when you think about, I heard you talking before the show, you're a left side of the brain guy, and then there's the right side of the brain people, right? When you think about those two groups working together, what are some of the principles that, you know, when you start with a website, when you get going with this?
Well, when you're looking at the spectrum, just in the design area of it, you have an information architect, a user experience designer, and then a visual designer. And the information architect, my job is really, we'll use an analogy, building a house.
Sure.
When you're about to build a house, the first thing you're probably going to do is sit down with your architect and talk to how many rooms, what's the footprint, and then you might get down to the details of what are the amenities and features that certain rooms or bathrooms, kitchens are going to have. That's an information architect. I'm going in, I'm understanding all the content, I'm going to devise a plan for navigation systems, I'm looking at taxonomies, whether they're hierarchical or flat, and in that I develop a deliverable, which is called a architectural diagram. And in the case of the building scenario, think of it as a stock list. And now I can hand that stock list over to the user experience designer. And the user experience designer's role is to, in the building, draft what it's going to look like. So the user experience designer is drafting everything to make sure that from the back door we go into a mudroom and then we go into a living room, because if you had the living room before the mudroom, it'd be a mess. Right. So it's all usability at that point, purpose and placement. Why are we putting it there? What purpose does it serve for the end user? And inevitably, they form that deliverable, a prototype, which is a handoff to the visual designer. And the visual designer's job is to breathe life into this and create a pixel-perfect rendition of the site or a comp. And the complexities of that design and the flexibility it has is really dependent on the CMS system you've chosen and how you've determined you want to deploy it.
So Scott, before I bring you into the conversation here, let me go back to that. I'm glad you explained it that way, Steve. Why is the creative look and feel of a website so important, and how has the evolution of a CMS platform affected the design process?
Well, the evolution, really there's 4 points that I like to look at when we look at the evolution of CMS. It's proliferation, innovation, maturation, and client participation. Okay. And when we look at that proliferation, there are many sites out there, many CMS content management systems, I should say, out there. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. Understanding what one is right for the entire project team is paramount. Innovation, when we look at today's technologies, you have HTML5, CSS 3.0, you even have responsive designs, which seems to be the buzzword of the year. And that's going to affect how we approach the design of a site. When we look at maturation, when I started this back in '96, you essentially had web. That was your one channel. Right. Maybe email started picking up, and over a while, email was an adopted channel that we had to account for in a design perspective.
Right, now we got social, now we got mobile.
Now you have social and mobile. So now you have 4 channels. Your content management system needs to be able to propel that content through those channels easily.
Okay. And go ahead, Scott.
No, I was just going to ask then, so a lot of the folks who watch this show are watching the show and they're in the middle of a selection process, or they're trying to decide what CMSs to use. Are there some considerations that you would advise that they make when they're looking for a CMS then, given from that perspective?
Yes. If you understand CMS, then you can actually delve into the mechanics of it, the actual specifications of what it is you're planning on deploying. But many of the clients, they don't necessarily understand content management systems. They understand the premise behind a content management system, but they may not know what is featured in a particular type of CMS. And I usually tell them, remain agnostic and make sure that the partner you're selecting has a process that you're comfortable with. You're comfortable with the way they're going to approach the deployment of this system. You're comfortable with the fact that they can then maintain, manage, and deploy that deployment of your content management system. I usually tell clients, you know, if in the home building scenario, if at the end of the day you want your dream home, it's really not going to matter whether or not that carpenter is using Stanley-powered tools or Milwaukee-powered tools. You want to just make sure they know how to use these tools to achieve that end result, your dream home.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a great analogy, and I want to go to this question. It's about design, because that's sort of the theme of what we're talking about here. So what difference does design really make with this world that we're living in right now, where it's so content-driven? In other words, isn't it more about the message than how cool it is or the place you're getting the message from?
Well, they do call them content management systems for a reason. You are there to manage content, and we don't call them design management systems, but the reality is design is crucial to the success of that site. People are going to formulate their decision in 10 to 12 seconds. There's research out there from Nielsen, who's a usability research group. 10 to 12 seconds, that's it. So you better be fast loading, and you better have a clear value proposition. So in this age of content, give me more content, you really have to rely on design. Design to do several things. Paginate properly, depending on device, to have the proper use of white space, the right fonts, to make sure that your calls to action are clearly designed so that people will actually begin to fall into a conversion path and ultimately reach a goal, whether it's theirs or yours.
I mean, we've seen a huge change in the way that consumers use websites today, right? I mean, I remember it was just 5 years ago or so that when you were talking to an information architect or when you were talking about a website, it was all about how many clicks does it take to get to the information, trying to keep it within 3. There was this assumption about the navigation that people were going to go to the home, land on the home page, and they were going to like, how long was it going to take for them to get there? And now we see this much more search-minded mentality and that sort of stuff. How does it change your profession and all of this?
You're going right to where my digital marketing team loves to be, and that is deep URL links right to the content page. We shouldn't have to have a situation where I'm searching on a particular service or product and I come to the home page of the site and then the game begins of how do I actually get you to the content you wanted. It's a deep URL. It takes me right to that product page. So that doesn't just come about by sprinkling a little pixie dust over your website. It is really a content strategy that uses search engine optimization to its fullest. And once again, 10 to 12 seconds, that design better pop.
Sure.
You talked about the number of different options out there for people when it comes to CMS solutions. What should people be considering when they're reviewing different options out there now? How do you start to make sense of this all?
Well, it definitely becomes a unique situation depending on what it is we're trying to deploy. Whether it's an intranet or an e-commerce platform, we're going to have very different needs. But what I try to look for, once again, remaining agnostic from platform, some of my own personal preferences as a designer, part of that information design team. I like a content management system that divorces the display layer from that application and management layer. It really does open up the design team to be a bit freer in content, but more importantly, there's a huge benefit for those content managers. They can now enter content into the content management system without regard for the specific place that this will display. It's the application layer that handles that. So you get the content in there, which actually opens the door to a lot of other contributors of content. You don't have to be well versed in HTML to start managing or maintaining your web presence or opening it up so that other departments can contribute content. That application layer is where it all happens, where it is smart enough to know, hey, this is the device we're on, this is the way we're going to show that content. Where we're on a mobile platform, it's going to be a lot different looking potentially from a desktop version. So you have that flexibility. The other thing that I like is that by divorcing the display layer, it really is that content inventory system, and part of your inventory are assets, whether they're file downloads, video, etc. And some of the better asset management models that I've seen, they actually allow you to upload large res images, but allow you through the editor itself to marquee, crop images to a specific size so that you're not trying to do all your image editing in a Photoshop or some other software. You're able to do it in the browser. More importantly, if the system is configured properly, the developers can actually force a specific ratio or specifically a finished dimension on that image so that these folks can't hurt themselves when they're replacing that hero shot on the landing page by putting it in too small, it gets blown up too big.
Well, and you said just 5 years ago how websites are. One of the things I think he's hitting on here that I think is important is we're in a day and age now where you need to make it easy internally for all your different departments to be a part of this. I mean, this used to be marketers only or IT only. Those silos are getting broken down everywhere, aren't they, Scott, now?
Yeah, I think you're right. That was the same question I was going to ask to him, is that I think I love your point about that. I think, information architecture and information design is not only all about how it, conforms to the front website, but also internally. And I really think that things like adoption and success of platforms internally are sorry, that success of platforms internally are so much dependent on high adoption by a user base. And so much of what a web content management system was there to bring to us was the ability for non-tech savvy folks to be able to go and use it. And so you play a big role in that as well, right? About streamlining that ability for internal folks to be able to use it.
Yeah, and I like to make sure that those tools for the end user, that content management, almost become rote repetition. If your job is to get the latest articles into the system, it should be easy. So at one level, the user role may be just that, a content manager. That should be a simplistic role. It should be very simple for them to introduce content into the system. Once again, if the display layer is divorced, they don't care where it shows up. They know the application handles that. They don't have to get specific. It's at that system management level where you start to see a lot of the powerful features and tools and flexibility of relating in specific content to different page templates, et cetera. So it really has to, it can't be overly simple and remain simple. At some point, there needs to be some form of flexibility and advanced feature in a content management system.
Steve Mammone is joining us in studio here on CMS Connected. I'm Butch Stearns, Scott Liewehr alongside. We're the co-hosts here on CMS Connected. We're talking very specifically about taking a creative look into the importance of a good web design and site architecture and the role that CMS platforms play in helping us create eye-catching websites. Steve, let me ask you this question. The term design itself, right? That can apply to more than one role in a CMS deployment. Are there specific roles that have unique or overlapping design requirements or concerns?
Well, yeah, and I think that goes back to what we talked about earlier as far as user-centered design going from information architect on one side to visual design. If we broaden that perspective though for a minute and look at the whole project team, there's other areas of overlap. I alluded to one of them earlier, and that is with the information architects and the digital marketing strategists. We're often in a situation where we're working together to try to build relevancy. I want the site easy for folks to use. I want terms to be relevant. Similarly, in their model, they want to seek relevancy because they know that's what search engines are trying to provide, relevant results to people. So if you talk about things in a relevant manner, the search engines will perceive that. Hopefully, they'll drive traffic to your site, qualified traffic to your site. So that's one example. On the other side, though, you have the content strategist that has to work potentially with the entire design team to really talk through what those use case scenarios are. What kind of content is going to be on what kind of pages? What are the tertiary pages going to look like? What kind of content manageability will they have, and how much can this content expand or grow is really going to play a large part in how that visual design takes shape. And then finally, I look at the visual designers and how they interact with the development team. And there's this go-between, the front-end developer, often overlooked but hugely important. They're taking this design work and they're cutting it up into HTML, CSS, and they're making sure that they're able to wrap that content management platform. Developers come in and they're doing a lot of that hard wiring to make it all work, but you have to understand what they're up against. A front-end developer now has to make sure that that content management system, that templating engine that I talked about, is strong enough so that as different content gets added into the system, as it gets portrayed across different devices, it remains compliant with different browsers, different operating systems, and now different devices, desktop, mobile, tablet.
I love what you're saying there, because a lot of the, even frankly in the way that you described initially what you do, made me first start to think, oh no, I hope we don't give folks the perception that this is a role that's just needed at the front end of a project up until the kind of point of launch of a site, for example. But you're describing activities like SEO, like even search log analysis, like things about, you're constantly going to be, there's going to be a role for this person a lot, is that right? And what are some of the things that they'd be kind of doing on a team day to day?
The actual
Besides
designer?
just designing the site, but there's a role for this, for an information, I would imagine, designer.
Well, absolutely, because then what we're doing is usability analysis for my team. So an information architect, a user-centered design, the user experience designer is now taking these use case scenarios that they use to employ to build this wireframe. They're now walking through this scaffold, this pixel-perfect rendition of what the site looks like. Similarly, the visual designer's role doesn't end the moment they hand off these beautifully formatted Photoshop files. It actually, they're brought back in after the front-end developer is able to wrap that site to ensure that it is holding the integrity of their design. And that content strategist is going to do their best to break that design by putting in my favorite, which are these super long biblical domain names or whatever it is that, if you try to put a no wrap around that column, you're basically going to blow the entire page out and leave very little for your content. So we look to do all of that stuff from a design perspective, even after the design has been handed off.
Let's wrap up with this, and we always do this when we get into conversations. We tend to wrap with mobile, but the question is about the opposite thinking of that. We know now that you almost have to start your thinking with mobile. So when it comes to this topic, when it comes to designing your website, and you mentioned the term responsive design, that is the term du jour these days about stuff. But how does responsive design affect the creative? How do you start thinking about mobile? Should you start thinking about mobile? The answer to that is yes, isn't it?
Yes, and for the most part.
Thank you.
If it's not, then the segment's over.
Yeah, no, and we've been literally, we've been doing this for years. We're watching the numbers with many of our clients, and we usually tell them, hey, as you approach 10%, you better have a strategy in mind. By the time you hit 15, you better be at it. And a lot of our clients are at that point and beyond. Hospitality industry, sports entertainment industry, these folks have been well immersed in mobile for quite some time. When we look at responsive, it's a great buzzword. I do have my own opinions of responsive design. Responsive, just to kind of set it up, is as the display layer gets bigger and smaller, the system will reconfigure the display on the fly. And at some point, you're going to get to a threshold where the design, the form factor even has to regenerate itself. And certain elements may be omitted or placed in a different area. You can go from a wide navigation right down to a hamburger bun menu where you click on it and now you see your vertical navigation. So when we're looking at that, I really feel responsive is great at the desktop. Desktop is the one place where size matters. It might be other places too, but for the topic of this conversation, size matters at the desktop.
It's a family show, Steve.
Yes, I'm trying to keep it clean. So, because there are different browser sizes, people may have their browser minimized, there's different monitor sizes, et cetera, so a responsive design makes great sense. What I like to see on the mobile front is a bit more adaptive. Responsive in the sense that it's the same page URL, it's the same code that's getting called, but the system logic is smart enough to say, give me back everything I need for this mobile display and display it like this. So what it's not doing is pulling back these huge hero shots and then saying display none to hide them. Because once again, what did we say at the beginning of the segment? It has to fast load and bring clear value proposition. It ain't gonna load fast if we're loading all this stuff that's hidden from the browser anyways. So
You should be a little more passionate about this.
yeah, I know, the hands are going everywhere.
Steve, thanks for coming in today.
Thank
we really
you.
appreciate it. Steve Mammone, you can find him at getfused.com. Again, a company here in Boston that's making a lot of noise. Congratulations on your success and continued success, my friend.
Thank you very much.
Okay, when we come back, we're going to be joined by Seth Gottlieb in our Spotlight segment, and we're going to take a closer look at Crafter software right after we hear from Adobe and Kentico here on CMS Connected.
Hello, Steve. Thanks for coming. My name is John. Any questions before we start? Good. How does your company currently measure results in digital marketing?
Well, we look at the bigger picture and try to see what kind of ripple effect we go for the key influencers who are. At the end of the day, we want to create a halo effect around our brand recognition.
We try to fine-tune engagements to get.
Working on getting a real 360-degree view of the customer to
cross-segment synergies. Likes?
closed-loop marketing,
Search,
classification of our brand.
SEO,
Click-through rates?
Just make it go viral.
Businesses today demand a powerful web content management and online marketing platform that can provide the best value at an affordable price with unlimited website possibilities. Kentico, the .NET Enterprise Marketing Solution and web content management platform of choice, powers more than 12,000 websites in over 84 countries, which means you get a stable, well-tested solution. Fully loaded with over 350 web parts and controls and more than 80 extensible modules. Kentico provides you with a fully integrated solution for building your online presence and running successful online marketing campaigns. It allows you to quickly launch an effective B2B or B2C site, intranet, online store, or branded online community, fully integrated with Facebook and Twitter. Test drive Kentico EMS today to get a complete appreciation of all its powerful features and capabilities.
And welcome back to CMS Connected. We heard from Adobe in there. We will hear from Kentico coming up. Time now for our In the Spotlight segment. And for that, we bring in Seth Gottlieb, Chief Marketing Technologist of Linebridge. Hey, Seth, how are you?
Very well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. You got Scott Liewehr here. You got myself. So today we're going to talk about CrafterCMS from Crafter Software, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so let's start. What can you tell us about Crafter Software, first of all? They're the new
Sure.
kids on the block, right?
Yeah. Well, like a lot of content management systems out there, they grew out of a custom software development project for a customer. The product has been in development since 2007. And then the company that built it, Rivet Logic, they gradually expanded it and deployed it to more systems. And then earlier this year, 2013, they launched it into its own product. They spun it off into its own company, Crafter Software, and CrafterCMS is the product.
So it was built on something else. So what makes it different? What makes it different?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that's interesting about this product. One is that it's built on another content management system.
Yeah.
The system is called Alfresco. And Alfresco is billed as the first open source content management system or enterprise content management system, although there's some disagreement on that claim. But they came out of out of Documentum. And an interesting thing about them is they said that they could do everything, all sorts of content management, but they were really, really bad at web content management. So you had a lot of customers looking at this, and they were looking for, well, how do we do web content management on Alfresco? And Alfresco kind of dallied into web content management. And then Rivet comes along and they say, we have a great extension or a way to build on top of Alfresco that gives you web content management. And since that time, Alfresco's kind of been moving away, or Alfresco's been moving away from web content management, and it's created a greater vacuum for Crafter to get into.
So, go ahead.
Oh, so the second interesting thing about Crafter is it's open source software.
Right.
Alfresco and Crafter are both open source. So I wouldn't look at that as like a primary reason to buy it, but it's just something to be aware of.
But is it unique with the two of them being open source? Is that kind of a unique feature?
Well, you know, the thing about open source licensing is if the foundation is open source, the thing on top of it usually has to carry a similar licensing. Because especially if you're distributing it that way. I guess you could have a commercial product that goes along with it, but a lot of times you have both of them be open source. So there's a free version and an enterprise version. The enterprise version is kind of functionally identical to the free version, but in order to use it, you have to buy an annual subscription, which is a support.
So this CrafterCMS, this Crafter Software solution, you talk about differentiators for it. What's missing? What's something that if you were doing this, you'd add on to this? Or
well,
what's missing?
I kind of talk about like its positioning in general. Like the philosophy, the positioning of the product is it's more of a platform. What Crafter wants you to do is use their platform to build unique solutions on top of. It's not like an out of the box, like just set it and forget it type of thing. Although there are a lot of nice kind of application level features, but its real strength is in the architecture and as a platform to build cool things on top of. So, for example, it's got a decoupled architecture. Mm-hmm. So the content management system and the delivery tier are very, very separate, and they just kind of pass XML in between them. So that's nice for an architect that wants to build a very sophisticated web application on the front end and use this product to push content into it. So you're not deploying new software every time you're publishing content. The foundational services are very good, like content modeling, workflow, multi-channel publishing, preview. That's all really strong. But the reason why you'd buy this product is if you had a really strong engineering group and you wanted to build something something notable or unique on the web, and you'd use this product to do it.
Who's staying up at night worrying about Crafter? Who's their top competitors?
Well, when you look at who's or what they're evaluating, it's really the standard suspects of Java. There's the companies that acquired, there's Adobe that acquired CQ5. There's Oracle that acquired FatWire. There's OpenText that acquired Vignette. So companies that are going into this and looking at Crafter, they're looking at kind of the standard enterprise Java applications. They also might be looking at Magnolia and maybe some of the open source as well, because they might have been brought into it that way. But in general, it's Java shops that want to kind of build big websites on this platform. The reason why they might choose Crafter over those is because they're doing a lot of custom development anyway, and they want to reduce their upfront costs and put that into building a unique web solution.
So, in your opinion, Seth, what type of companies should give Crafter a look at this? Who should be their target market?
Sure.
Who is their target market?
Well, it's funny, when I was doing CMS selection consulting, a lot of my customers were customers whose website was their product. So they were kind of web businesses out there. And when they were looking at content management systems to use, they always ran into that, like, well, we don't want to build our product, our business on top of this particular commercial CMS. So I see that a lot of those types of companies whose product is their website, and they want to constantly push the envelope on that website, be looking really hard at Crafter. So strong engineering, and also decent sized budget, because the subscriptions will cost in the six figures every year.
Thanks for your time, Seth.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Seth Gottlieb, he's the Chief Marketing Technologist for LineBridge. That was our review of CrafterCMS from Crafter Software. If you would like to reach out to Seth to find out more about him and to find out his review on that, check the information. Well, there's Crafter right there, if you would like to find out more about that. But if you want to connect with Seth, Seth, how do you encourage people to get a hold of you?
Twitter, SG Gottlieb.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Thanks, Seth. So, time now for us to go into our rapid fire segment here on CMS Connected. Again, you are watching CMS Connected. This is the Web Content Management's only news commentary show. I'm Butch Stearns along with Scott Liewehr, and it's time to put Scott on the clock during our rapid fire segment. Scott, are you ready?
Like you say, I'm as ready as, I'm definitely ready, man. Let's do
All
it.
right, so let's dive into it. HubSpot. We start with HubSpot. Brian Halligan, the CEO and co-founder of HubSpot, a marketing software company he co-founded 6 years ago, at their recent Inbound, announced their new web CMS capabilities at their Inbound conference earlier this week. Inbound is a 4-day marketing experience that HubSpot does. They bring together thousands of marketers from around the globe for this annual event held right here in Boston. Scott, your thoughts on this latest announcement from HubSpot? Why is it significant?
So I think this is significant because once again we see more and more collusion and competitors coming into the space in this kind of what we call the CEM space, customer experience management, where we've got web content management vendors out there buying and acquiring analytics vendors and search vendors and others. And now we also see, coming from the other side, we see marketing vendors like HubSpot, known very well for its marketing automation capabilities, specifically in small to mid-sized businesses, now coming into the web content management space. So we see more and more of this coming together. They call it the customer optimization system. Essentially, the idea is that in all-in-one package, you can provide to the marketers, who's typically in the size of businesses they're dealing with, tends to be a one-man shop, one-man marketing team, has now the ability not only to push out campaigns and be able to manage those and optimize those, but can now also be able to manage the content of a website from one simple-to-use platform. And I think it's a really nice thing that they're doing. I don't think that they're threatening many of the other WCM players in the space yet, given the size and kind of focus of this, but I think it's definitely interesting news.
For our second announcement here on Rapid Fire in this edition of CMS Connected, we go to a pricey partnership, if you will. Consulting firm Accenture has partnered up with Hybris to combine its marketing and customer experience expertise with the Hybris e-commerce system, offering customers an all-in-one technology and implementation system. Who are the winners of this partnership, Scott?
I think once again we talk about this market, just this kind of CEM world starting to really come in on itself. We saw that the entrance on the vendor side, on the service provider side, we saw Accenture just not so long ago by Acuity Group a few months back. We also saw Hybris on the commerce side. They were acquired by SAP. So traditionally not necessarily known for commerce. Well, actually they had their own platform, their own capabilities there. But once again, we see kind of CRM and commerce coming together, and we see Accenture coming into the space, or they're coming into the digital marketing realm. I think it's an obvious move that Accenture Interactive takes on Hybris as a platform because of Acuity's capabilities here. But we see an awful lot of interesting things. Now, the really large companies who are hiring the Accentures of the world have the ability now to essentially sell their products over the web. We're seeing lots of space come together, technologies come together. We're seeing the service providers all offering new capabilities, and so it's just a interesting space. And this is not my day.
Rapid fire, the pressure of rapid fire gets to you.
This is just not my day. I cannot spit out a single
I'll give you
word.
another chance.
Yeah.
All right. So you got a couple of strikes
gonna
on
get
you
better
right
on this
now.
one.
Let's go on with rapid
Sure,
fire.
let's do it.
Our next headline
Jeez.
that Scott is on the clock for: Kofax buys Kapow. Kofax been making some excuse me. Son, you see what you're doing to me now? Has been making some serious moves to position itself in the big data market in recent months. In the latest move, it has announced the acquisition of data integration software vendor Kapow for $47.5 million. While the deal itself is not huge in terms of money, the money involved, it does demonstrate ongoing growth for Kofax, which also bought business intelligence and analytics vendor Altosoft in March this year for $13.5 million. Scott, what do you make of these moves by Kofax? What does this say?
Sure. So Kofax is one of these companies that's been around in the document management space for a long time. They've been dealing with trying to convert content into what's called unstructured data for a long time. They've been taking faxes and getting that into digitized products. Now, once again, you've got on the Kapow side. Kapow is really well known for being able to take data and information from a website, being able to scrape that information and put it into structured content format. Specifically in the web content management space, it's been especially useful to transfer content from one system to the next because it can do that screen scraping, because it can gather all that data, pull it down into a database, and be able to upload it now in a meaningful way. I think this is interesting because they put a big data spin on it where, again, they're looking for analytics and that, but I think what it's all about is essentially trying to take unstructured data and make meaning out of it. What we talked about earlier, that notion of small data, being able to take meaning out of information which is typically hard to peruse and hard to make valuable, and now Kofax is going to find a way to do that through Kapow.
Next story, Sitecore headlines, the latest changes with Sitecore. Let's talk about them. Web CMS provider Sitecore announced big changes on how it both prices and sells its digital marketing and web content management licenses in North America. And the two will now merge under what is being called the Customer Engagement Platform. Scott, what's behind these changes, and how are customers going to perceive these changes?
I think positively. This is the struggle I think that Sitecore has had. Sitecore has been really well known and well regarded in the web content management space. It's been entering, for 5+ years into the digital marketing space, and they've had their digital marketing suite for a while. The challenge has been adoption. Digital marketing suite is the kind of, it's been well sought out by folks. People buy Sitecore because of its capabilities to create personalized content and experiences, yet it's not necessarily being deployed nearly as quickly as it's being purchased. And so I think by them coupling all that together takes away the idea that it's going to always be the phase 2 of any given project, and it's going to be more at the forefront of folks' minds as they have that capability. They buy them all in one package thing. I think the challenge here is still getting their partner ecosystem to get really comfortable with the capabilities that they now have in their hands with the digital marketing suite, or now called the CEP platform, the customer experience platform. Being able to pull that all together is, selling it together is one thing, being able to implement all of it is another entire thing, but I think it's good for them, a good move for them.
All right, 2 final points to put you on the hot seat here in rapid fire. Oracle releases Web Center updates. Let's talk about this, Scott. What do we need to know about this?
Sure. 2 major enhancements. I think this is great news because Oracle made big news 2 years ago when they bought FatWire, as Seth referred to earlier in the show. They also bought a number of other platforms in the space that are kind of in similar realms, but they really have sat on them for a long time, and we haven't seen a whole lot of public announcement about how they're going to be pulling these capabilities together. So it's nice to see them do a new public release. What they've emphasized in this release is search, right, and their ability to provide search for Web Center sites, something that's, I think, crucially important for web content management systems to be able to do quite well, not merely just because we want to be able to search the content, but actually to be able to advise and create metadata to create make it easier for folks to find content in the future. The second aspect of this is the video capabilities. They're pulling in the significant digital asset management capabilities, and I think that's a trend that we've talked about on the show a number of times before, and we're going to continue to see this idea of rich media and rich video content as being a core part of websites today.
Our final topic here on Rapid Fire has to do with the Digital Pulse Conference coming up in October here in Boston as part of the IMS series, Inbound Marketing Summit. We've got the Digital Pulse Conference October 16th and 17th, the Heinz Auditorium in Boston. Some announcements that are tied to this.
Sure, yeah, it's October 16th through 18th at the Heinz Convention Center, and I think we've made a couple of really good, I'm really psyched about the keynotes that we've got in there. The first one that we'll talk about is Ray Velez, who co-authored a book called Converge. And the book Converge, you should look for it and pick it up if you haven't got it already, is a great basically discussion about this whole digital marketing realm and how all these technologies are coming together and how people can put them to use and essentially work in this era of digital disruption. So Ray is the CTO of Razorfish. Another one that's been on this, we've been talking about for quite a bit. He's going to come in and be one of our keynotes. The other one is Lee Daniels, is a new keynote. He's just produced a movie called The Butler, which was got rave reviews and I think was the box office #1 hit. So we're excited to have both of them there. We've got a great bunch of content to talk about, and digitalpulsesummit.com is where you can go find out more information.
Digitalpulsesummit.com. Great stuff, Scott.
All right.
All right, always good hanging with you.
Got a little bit better, but
Thank you for being a part of this edition of CMS Connected. A quick programming reminder for those of you watching the live show. Our next show comes your way in September. Go to Falcon Software and you can find out more about the exact date. The topic will be content marketing. Our spotlight feature will be eSpirit's First Spirit CMS. So on behalf of Scott Liewehr, my co-host, I'm Butch Stearns. Once again, thanks to our guests, Steve Mammone and Seth Gottlieb on this edition of CMS Connected. And of course, thanks to our sponsors, Falcon Software and Digital Clarity Group. That's right, Falcon Software and Digital Clarity Group, the lead sponsors here on CMS Connected. We'll see you next time. So get connected and stay connected with CMS Connected.